Welcome back, everybody, to the Unclassified Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Wheeler. I'm joined here with Preston Stewart, who is also a host, and we have a lot to talk about today. But you know what I want to talk about most? What? Oh, you're grimacing. You don't know where this is going to go yet.
Yeah, we don't cover this before we turn on, so I have no idea what's going. And
no.
It can go in a lot of different directions. Okay, let's hear it.
When it comes to lobster, no other food on the planet is allowed to say market price, okay? Everyone else has to put their prices up front, or it says this much per pound, right? But lobster, suddenly it's market price. What market? Am I supposed to believe lobster's traded like a commodity, like it's gold, oil, or gas? It's market price. It just seems like they make it up. The waiter looks at you and he goes, $36, $16. You know what I'm saying? No one else hides behind this. And they say, well, it's about the shipment. It's because of the shipment. They're not rare. And I would just say we've been eating lobster here in North America for 400 years now. I'm sure we can figure it out. If we can figure out how to transport milk, we can figure out how to figure out the lobster situation. Do you have any thoughts on this? Because I do feel like I feel like they're cheating. And lobster are not endangered. There are a lot of lobsters. They're not particularly hard to catch. They're in one spot.
Wow. Yeah. Deep.
All right. Well,
that's are you losing sleep over that? Where does this sit on the concern scale? It seems like
I was in Trader Joe's the other day, and I saw the place that I sometimes get a lobster roll from, and then I just thought, the whole.
Wait, is the lobster roll marked as market price?
Yeah, all of it is. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Anything with a lobster in it's market price. And it's truly, deeply bizarre. Shall we get into our first topic?
Yep. Well, admin. Hold on. Admin first.
Yes.
So we've been trying to figure out our footing here, and I think it's going well. We're watching some positive numbers, some positive feedback on all the platforms. And something we've regularly talked about since starting was bringing in more guests. And we think the best way to do that is to have a separate standalone episode for a guest. So what we're looking at, we're in the process of putting this all together right now. We've got our list of invitees that we'd love to have on. But I think what we're looking at, and step in here anytime, Ben, is we'll continue with these weekly shows like we're doing right now, and then we'll layer on, in addition, a 20, 30, 40-minute interview with somebody in this space earlier in the week. Comes out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that. Is that pretty accurate?
That sounds 100% correct to me, yes.
So the whole idea there is we're trying to expand. I mean, it's fun chatting with Ben each week, but we also have like a finite amount of opinions on these things. And when you talk about some of this stuff over and again, you end up hearing the same thoughts, I think, at times. So we're going to try to branch out a little bit and pull in some folks with different opinions, different viewpoints, different experiences, and try to expose some different thoughts there.
Absolutely. We're having a new show. Same podcast feed, though.
Yep.
Whether on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. It'll be in the same feed, so you don't have to go anywhere. You'll just have to watch another thing. So it'll be good, and everyone's very excited for it. People are coming up to me in the grocery store, grown men, tears in their eyes. They're saying, thank you. Thank you so much for this. This is what I've been waiting for.
It's crazy, yeah.
But you know what else makes grown men cry? Tariffs. So let's talk about tariffs. On yesterday, Thursday, or actually I guess this is Wednesday night, late Wednesday night, the U.S. Court for International Trade ruled that the Trump tariff regime, at least the mass reciprocal tariffs on every country in the world, are unconstitutionally does not have the authority. And they're saying that under the Emergency Economic Act that he used, he overshot his authority. And they also kind of hit into this legal theory of delegation, saying that Congress can't delegate their tariff powers to the president. And so later on Thursday morning, another court also sided with the plaintiffs, who were like a wine company and U.S. states. And they said, yeah, he does not have this authority. Now, and then in an emergency ruling, later yesterday afternoon, Thursday, Trump got that tariff power back. And it will now go to the Supreme Court, who will determine whether or not the president can assume Article 2 powers of the Constitution if they're not going to enforce it or if they delegate it to him. And so that has created a very interesting legal debate, one that I find fascinating and don't really have an opinion on because I don't really know what's right. But essentially they're saying the Supreme Court will have to rule, can the president take powers that Congress has if Congress decides they're not going to use those powers and or gives it to him? Right now, I think the argument is not that they're giving it to him. I think it's mostly that they don't have an opinion on it. And so it'll come down to that. There are some legal scholars who say, no, delegation's unconstitutional. There are others that say the balance of power is a living thing, right? So if the president reaches into Congress and Congress doesn't push back, then the president has more power. You know, same with the courts or whatever. So it'll be an interesting few days ahead of us, I think. We're going to get to the bottom whether or not he has the authority to do these tariffs. He still has the authority. It's important to note for like the auto tariffs and the aluminum and steel. He's always had that authority. It's just whether or not he can do mass reciprocal tariffs. He's always had the authority to tariff individual countries, individual line items, individual resources. Thoughts?
Doesn't that change everything, though? Like, we're still seeing press conferences with senior officials coming out saying, like, well, these negotiations are ongoing, and we're making progress here, we're not making progress there. It seems to me like it turns everything on its head. Like, what is a country negotiating now if the underlying threat or position possibly doesn't exist? That's where I'm a little bit confused here. Like, it seems like we may have come at this from a negotiating position that we didn't have. So, like, if you're China right now, why are you talking? Like, what is you don't know the things that President Trump is threatening, he may not be able to pull through on. So China may have the upper hand in some of the, like, it seems like every country around the world would just stop and be like, cool, we're not going to agree to anything quite yet because we don't know what authorities you have.
Yeah. I mean, it is true that, that is an issue that has kind of undermined his position. At the same time, it's not the court's job to look at the situation and go, well, it'll undermine his position, trade negotiations. They seem to think if the Supreme Court decides it's true that he did actually overstep his authority, then it's really not, I guess maybe it undermines him in China's eyes or stuff like that, but I don't think it matters in actuality. I think the more interesting part here is that they will have to likely, I think, pursue tariffs under a different law, because while we wait for the Supreme Court, whether or not they take this, I assume they will, this is going to be hitting the courts every which way, and we're going to have a pause and a freeze every other day, sometimes multiple times a day, as we saw Thursday. So, it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. It also kind of ties back to the Trump administration's complaint about whether or not district judges can do a nationwide injunction, and they very much don't want that to be. The Supreme Court did hear a whole thing on this, where the Trump administration over like the birthright citizenship debate, they weren't ruling on that. They're ruling on whether or not courts can issue a nationwide injunction. This was like 2 weeks ago. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I personally have no idea where this is going. I think John Roberts will be more inclined to say, well, if Congress doesn't want the power, then I guess the president can have it. But also, this is a pretty originalist court, and the Constitution is pretty clear in that tariffs belong to Congress.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like we're continually stuck in this loop of don't take action when you're looking at it from a business perspective. How many countries and companies around the world are just like, cool, we'll continue to tread water. Like, they can't make decisions. They've probably been holding for a period of time, and this is just another reason for them to not make those big investments in one direction or another. So, I don't know. It's exhausting, man.
It really is. But it seems as though, I don't know if you saw the interaction in the Oval Office, but a reporter asked Trump about the Wall Street term taco, and it seems like they may have rage-baited the president into being a bit more consistent on tariffs. Taco, for those who didn't see the incident, stands for Trump always chickens out. And Trump seemed psychologically damaged when they asked him about this. I mean, how did you expect him to respond, though? But I don't know. I mean, maybe we will get more consistency over this, just as after they rage baited him. I don't know. But speaking of rage bait, Israel, what's going on there?
Like the same and not the same. So there's a couple big stories now. Right now, it sounds like Hamas, Israel, and the U.S. are in the process of maybe accepting another ceasefire deal. Steve Witkoff just put this forward. We've got the text of it as reported by the Times of Israel. I'm not going to run through it because it's essentially the same that we've seen for any ceasefire deal. Hostages come out, aid comes in, a number of Palestinian prisoners are released. They start talking towards some end of the war, and Israel stops military operations. Like, it's always some variation of that. My understanding at this point, as we're recording the morning of May 30th, is that Israel has accepted, Hamas has not accepted, and has pushed back. So, like, I think people are probably going to start losing patience with this if they have not already. My gut says that there's already been a shift of attention away from this conflict because of what I just explained. Like, the exact didn't we have this pretty much, like, to explain how this ceasefire agreement is different than previous, you've got to be in the weeds, man. And most people, just talking from a U.S. perspective, most Americans aren't even on the same, they're not in the same zip code, let alone in the weeds of this conflict. So they're hearing the same things that they've heard now for a couple of years, and they're probably just tuning it out. Now, I don't know who that necessarily, you can probably make arguments as to who that benefits, but it's the same in a lot of ways. Now, something that's different is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation started providing aid in the Strip this week. This is really unique. This is I feel like I want so much more information on this because it sounds at baseline so sketchy, but also like I kind of like the idea. It is a U.S. company. They're founded in the United States with U.S. and Israeli backing, in the sense that Netanyahu and Trump or their administration have said, yeah, that's a good idea. We don't know if either government gave them money or just like, you need some government. For somebody or any organization to go into Gaza right now and do anything, they need government support. So like maybe the extent of their government support is that the two governments are allowing them to do this, right? Opening the door for it to happen. But this group has American security personnel. It's an American private security company providing security in Gaza. Now, that could mean that they hired locals. That does not automatically mean that it's American veterans in there, but it's an American company, so there could be some in some sort of oversight position. And they started handing out aid a couple days ago in 2 locations in the Gaza Strip. And to do that, they're scanning biometric data of the Palestinians. This, I'll tell you what, man, I really feel like this is being underreported, and I don't know. So they're scanning biometric data, and they're basing that on, they're looking at a database to then determine if this person or a family member is associated with Hamas. It's not entirely clear what the cutoff there is, right? So is it that your cousin was arrested 10 years ago for throwing rocks at the IDF? Or is it that, that your fingerprint showed up on an AK-47 used in an attack against Israeli forces? So there's some hesitancy with Palestinians of like, do I want to risk going to get this aid and maybe getting detained? There's already been some stories of people being pulled aside because they might be a neighbor of somebody whose cousin was affiliated with Hamas. So they're asking questions about that. Nonetheless, this began, and right out the gate just fell apart. So there was a mass rush. They were overwhelmed. The IDF is pulling perimeter security. They had to start firing shots into the air. Fences overrun, and it looks like it took a couple hours, and they eventually got control back of the area and have continued supplying aid. But, Ben, we don't know who's providing the money behind this organization, from what I know. Look, maybe it's out there. Probably be like a good thing to know. We don't know who's funding this. All of the international aid organizations, they're not touching it because they say it's not transparent. It's not clear how they're doing it. The founder of this the chief executive of the organization stepped down a week before they went live saying we can't do this the way that we need to. So it's a mixed bag, man. They 100% are delivering aid into Gaza. Like, we've seen the pictures and the videos from Palestinian channels. Some aid is being delivered, but the entire rest of this is just a little, I would say, murky at best.
Why do you think this group is so mysterious?
I don't know if that's intentional or not. That's the thing. It's a new nonprofit organization. Now, the IDF put out a statement saying like that the reason that this is needed is because the UN and other organizations have not done a good job of separating Hamas from the population. And too much of the aid has gone directly to Hamas and it ends up in the tunnels and assisting the fighters, which is it's a nightmare trying to sort that out here, no doubt. But the IDF stance has been that the existing organizations have not done this well enough and have kind of prolonged the fight by allowing essentially Israeli humanitarian aid to go to the people that they are fighting. So that's the argument for this type of organization. It feels very Trumpian in the sense of it's a private market solution that the government was not able to figure out. And I don't know that necessarily they need to disclose their funding if it's a private organization. So, let me turn this back on you. Where would it be concerning to you if where the funding was coming from? It's like if we found out that X company or X country was funding it, where would the concern be?
I don't know if I have any concern. I mean, they're just giving humanitarian aid, right? And there's nothing wrong with the aid, I assume. It's not like poison.
No, I mean, this is one of the frustrations in this conflict is there are people complaining that the aid is not sufficient and it's not the right type of aid and it's not exactly what you need to give for people in this circumstance at this time, but it's food and medicine and all that stuff. So, yeah, it's not poison. Yeah, an answer to that question bluntly.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it would. I think it would be weird if the U.S. government was funding it in the sense of we had our own aid operation. So I think it'd be weird if we were outsourcing it, but I don't know. That is so strange, though.
I think it does a good job, again, to go back to we're moving on here in the United States, for better or for worse, depending on how you view this conflict. I do think we're moving on, and I think Trump is tired of it. And I think the American people are not paying attention to it much anymore. And by putting a nonprofit in there, a private corporation, I believe it's a nonprofit. It's definitely a private corporation. I believe it's a nonprofit. By putting them in there, it's, hey, not U.S. government. I think it continues our kind of shift away.
So Israel, though, speaking of shifting away, how are they going to escape this growing call for an arms embargo in Europe against them? You're seeing France is started making those calls. France seems like they're going to recognize a Palestinian state. Spain has called for an embargo. Israeli ambassadors are trying to convince Germany not to impose one. I think the UK will probably follow the three of them right along. And it seems, as far as I can tell, that the United States is not really getting involved in terms of stopping it or calling for one. How do you think they get out of this, or do they not get out of it and they do get the arms embargo placed on them? Because once it's there, it's hard to get rid of.
Yeah, that might be what we're seeing with the ceasefire right now. Again, Israel and Netanyahu appear to have agreed to this ceasefire. So put this in terms of Russia and Ukraine, right? We see a ceasefire deal come out. The United States lays something on the table. One side says, great, let's do it. And then the other side kind of walks away. We can step back on that and say, wait a minute. Why does this one side keep agreeing to the ceasefire and the other doesn't? Maybe there's an issue here. And I wonder if there's part of that at play with Israel accepting these terms. They got terms that they like, and they can now go to the European countries and the United States and say, hey, guys, look, we're trying. You said, here's the ceasefire plan. We accepted it. What more do you want from us? I think the other thing you might see here is an increase in Israeli aid moving into the Gaza Strip. It's a bit of a challenge because that is what they're using as part of the negotiation, like in exchange for hostages. But that's been the major pushback from a lot of the European countries right now is the lack of aid coming into Gaza. So if Israel opens up that gate and pushes some in the short term, that might be what they use to try to go back to some of these European countries and say, look, we're doing what you want. Let's come back to this embargo later on.
The other place they find themselves in hot water is just across the Middle East in Iran, where they seem to have entered a full-fledged feud with, I don't know if it's just the president or the country as a whole or the administration as a whole. I don't really know what's going on there, but President Trump ordered the U.S. forces to stop making joint strike plans on Iran's nuclear program with Israel. He also warned Netanyahu about striking Iran's nuclear program without his permission and doing so before he can strike a deal and after he strikes a deal. It seems like Israel is losing the front there against Iran. What's your read on it? What's happening here?
Yeah, so the statement of telling our military to stand down planning against the nuclear facility or strike, like, it's just performative because those plans exist. You can't put that genie back in the bottle. They are there. Maybe we stop further refinement on it, but here's the thing: underground nuclear facilities don't move very quickly. So if we have some targeting lined up with Israel for the locations as they are today, that's probably going to be good in another couple of weeks or a few months. But I think it was signaling to Israel and to the rest of the world that my gut says that Trump is trying to avoid conflict at all costs anywhere around the world. I think we saw this with the Houthis. He walked away and declared victory. And we got, I would say 30% of what we were fighting for there. And it does not appear to have cost him here in the United States. And I think it shows probably the direction that he would prefer to go in some of these conflicts is walk away with less and just declare victory than go all in. So I'm trying to kind of view that in the sense of Iran here. Now, an issue with Iran is that just a couple weeks ago, the new U.S. intelligence assessment came out saying that Iran continues to not develop nuclear weapons program. This was signed off on by the new DNI, Tulsi Gabbard. So technically this one came out under her, but it's the same assessment that we've been seeing since 2003, is that, yes, Iran is continuing to enrich uranium, but they have paused their nuclear weapons program. Just a couple days ago, Fox News started reporting on this Austrian report saying just the opposite. This Austrian domestic intelligence report, mind you, says the Iranian nuclear weapons development program is well advanced and Iran possesses a growing arsenal of ballistic missiles capable of delivering nuclear warheads over long distances. Directly contradicts the U.S. assessment, which just sets off alarm bells. I don't know. I don't have any insight into this to say, well, this one's right and that one's wrong. There's been some other countries pushing back on that U.S. assessment as well, but I think it's worth noting that we have European allies right now saying, hold on, they have a nuclear weapons program and it's continuing to advance. To me, that reads a little bit like, especially when a U.S. organization like Fox News picks it up, like, hey, we need to be more hawkish. We need to be real about actually taking out these military capabilities.
It's very interesting that they seem split on whether or not they have a nuclear weapons program. And I wonder if there's a reason for that or what's going on there. But also, it feels like reverse Saddam in the sense that American intelligence was showing that he had a nuclear weapons program, active one, and Europeans are saying, no, he doesn't. And now it just feels like a reverse Saddam in the sense the United States is saying that Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program, and Europe is saying that he does. I don't know who's right. I do find it kind of odd if the United States has not been able to pick that up, because you're right, it has been our assessment since 2003 that they are not developing a nuclear weapon. It is all very odd. But I am glad that Trump seems to have put peace with Iran forward as a proposal and not not about bombing the facilities.
I just have that the Iraq comparison is good because I was let's see, sophomore, junior in college when we invaded, junior in high school, when we invaded Iraq, and very different media space at that point, but I think that's fresh on a lot of our minds. That was, depending on how you look at it, either a lie or manufactured consent for the reasons to go into Iraq. And I have that back of mind when looking at anything now. Is something being hyped up that isn't there to try to get us to take a certain action because we've been burned, quite frankly. And I don't know. When you have directly contradictory reports like this, I can't help but wonder that in the back of my mind. Is there a reason that because there's always going to be a slant to these things, but this is too far different. It just sets off some alarm bells.
I feel like if they genuinely have one, I feel like we'd be feeling tests, like through the earthquake seismic calculator, or whatever the hell it's called.
So this gets complicated and messy. The nuclear weapons program has a lot of different aspects to it. So it does not mean that they are necessarily testing a nuclear bomb. It can be the miniaturization of a nuclear warhead. It can be the delivery system capable of firing that. So it's not just a matter of, like, there's two different ways, or at least two different avenues to move forward on that. We should get a nuclear weapons expert on here to talk about it. But there's the actual enrichment and the creation of the bomb, and then there's the delivery system as well that are separate tracks. So there are ways that Iran could be developing one while they still don't actually have a bomb.
That's interesting. So you don't think that I guess if they conduct a test, we'll know, I assume.
You would think.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, you got to think we would know at some point, right? Or China would know. Someone would know.
In fact, that's one of the things that people push back on is there's kind of this view that when you're moving towards a nuclear weapon, you're moving towards creating that first warhead, and then you start the miniaturization process. God, I have a hard time with that word. And then you figure out how to attach it to a delivery mechanism. So people look at this and say, well, if Iran is still, let's make up a number, 6 weeks to be able to get to a bomb, then we have to layer these other things on top of that. But if you're Iran or a country genuinely thinking about doing this, you're probably doing some of these things simultaneously. Because why would you do it in a linear fashion and have everything else on hold when you can probably get ahead of it a little bit? It's not a secret, or it is a secret. It's not unknown how to deliver nuclear warheads. So I would be, if Iran truly does want that to happen, you have to expect that they would probably be looking into those other areas as well.
That is a good point. And I guess if you're Iran, you probably don't start testing that until you have more than one, given the implications, right? So, interesting. Well, going a little bit to the north, Ukraine. Lots going on in Ukraine.
2 weeks.
A whole lot.
2 weeks, yeah.
2 weeks. What's crack-a-lackin' here in Ukraine?
We're starting to actually see Russian mill bloggers and Russians in general mock President Trump recently, which is a change. There's been a few different avenues that this has taken since he came into office. Right out the gate, there were some people in Russia that kind of celebrated it and said, "This is great. You know, he is going to be not our guy, not our side." I don't want to turn it that extreme, but saying that he would take positions favorable to Russia in the conflict. And there were a lot of the mill bloggers and the commentators that kind of jumped on that and said, guys, don't be so certain. Like, he's unpredictable. We don't know the way it'll go. And I would say by and large, it's been kind of a wait and see with Trump. But just a couple days ago, he said, hey, Putin's got 2 weeks to show us that he actually means what he says. And the running joke there is this is the third time in 5 weeks he's given Putin 2 weeks.
He didn't say consecutive, Preston.
Yeah. That was the problem with the in the war in 24 hours, right? He said, I didn't tell you which 24 hours.
Yeah.
Like, oh, God. Okay. No, wasn't that Kellogg? I think that was General Kellogg. It said he didn't say
It was
which 24
Kellogg.
hours.
Yeah, you didn't say they were consecutive
God,
24
all right.
hours. Yeah.
Anyways, the Russians saw that, and the response was like, what are we supposed to do here? The guy just changes his mind every single day. And one of the assessments from a mill blogger was, hey, look, he's just dragging his feet, and the longer he drags his feet, the better it is for us. And they're starting to kind of make fun of him. I don't know. There's been no progress on the ceasefire front. Russia clearly has shown no indications of wanting to end this thing anytime soon. They're continuing to advance. In fact, we're seeing their spring/summer offensive really start to materialize. They've taken more territory in the north near Sumy. They've also continued to advance near Pokrovsk in the southeast. And Ukraine is kind of transitioning to more of, not they have been for quite a while, more of a defensive posture. So we're not seeing a lot of Ukrainian offensive operations. They're not built for that right now. It's not where their strength is. They're starting to use more and more drones to cost the Russians to take any amount of land. But the ceasefire negotiations are the big picture, and there's just no progress at all.
It feels like every other day, Russia's, we're committed, we're going to do these negotiations, these ceasefires in Istanbul or wherever else they have them. And they're just like, we're going to do them. We thank President Trump for his commitment to peace. And then it just doesn't go anywhere. This past weekend, they launched over 1,000 missiles and drones at Ukrainian cities, 400 at Kyiv. And it was nice to see Trump finally say, well, I don't know where this came from. I'm sure everyone here saw him say, I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. He's lost his mind. This is not the guy I know. Yeah, welcome to like 3 years ago. Welcome to 2008, for Christ's sake. And it is troubling that he keeps giving him more shots. And Marco Rubio should know better, but he seems to be is still in on the bit. I would like to see the United States. I mean, look, if Trump treated Putin how he treats his domestic enemies, this war would have been over by now. And I wish that he would. He should just flood the zone of weapons, and he should say, this is what happens when you disrespect me. And it can be like this macho Trumpism that he always wants.
That was a back of mind thing for me during the campaign, is I thought there's a chance here. I wouldn't even put a percentage on it, but a chance that Trump gets into office, finds out that Putin does not listen to him or anyone, as we're seeing play out in real time right now, and Trump gets pissed off and says, enough, I'm going to flood the zone, like you said, and I'm going to be the American president that defeats the Russians, because he could then claim it. And that's going to be the legacy. Nobody has been able to do this. Everybody was too scared to take on the Russians, and I finally beat them. I thought there was a chance that could, and maybe that's still there. But I want your opinion on something here, because it's been frustrating to see. It feels like we took some steps backwards, where they have to relearn that Putin is not being honest, he's not being genuine, he's shifting the goalposts, and may not actually want peace at all. I think that writing has been on the wall for a while, and it's been frustrating that we've almost had to relearn that with this new administration. I wanted your thoughts on why is that? Is that Trump is looking at certain people in his orbit that have no idea what they're talking about? I've been confused by that, because it seems like the information has been there, and a stance that I've long had is that Trump didn't understand the conflict. But a level deeper, why? Like, he's got access to whoever he wants. Why does it seem like he's so surprised that Putin is doing what most of us expected Putin to do?
So that is a grand question, isn't it? I think Trump romanticizes Putin in his mind, and he is something more than what Trump thinks. I read this book once. I'm blanking on what the name was called, but in it they said that Trump, when he was running in 15 and 16, he would tell this reporter over and over and over again, the only country on earth that can destroy the United States is Russia, and they would point to their nuclear weapons. And so because of that, he believes the United States and Russia have to be at peace, and they cannot be begrudging enemies. And that seems to be true. Trump is a Cold War boomer and seems to have this heightened opinion of Russia, even if they are, I mean, for Christ's sake, Mississippi has a higher GDP than Russia. And it is kind of all comes from that. And I think he thought he would find an ally in Putin because, Trump has like the strongman authoritarian desire, and he thinks, well, Putin will respect it if I have that. But he's missing the fact that Trump is unique on the world stage in that he is a world leader without an ideology. He is, in fact, the ideology just revolves around him. And so I think that ties into why he's surprised about Putin. That, no, Putin, very genuinely does not like the West and believes that it's here to bring the downfall of Russia, even if it's a completely schizophrenic, paranoid opinion. And Trump just doesn't understand that, because to Trump, it's all personal, right? All the politics, domestic and international, is personal. It has nothing to do with the stars and the stripes or liberalism or free trade or the world order. It is just all personal and what he feels inside. And so I think that is why he has to relearn this. And I would argue Marco Rubio didn't have to relearn this, nor did General Kellogg or anyone else around him. They all knew. Everyone in there knows, except maybe the 25-year-old gropers in his administration. But, yeah, that is, I think, the situation at play here is that he is, and I'm not trying to get into ad hominem, but he's just a delusional old man who romanticizes this other lesser delusional old man.
A part of it, to me, I feel like so much of it is tied up in economic value, to where that's how Trump views the world. And it reminds me of, which I think in a lot of cases can play out and works well, and is genuinely how things transpire. It reminds me of I can't remember if it was a direct quote or just some commentary before World War I, where people in 1913 said the world can no longer go to war. We're too economically intertwined. It would be economic suicide. It wouldn't war is a problem for everybody. You're going to make less money, so why would you go to war? And that was in 1913. And I think it misses, in a purely rational economic sense, got it. Probably. But we're fallible. We make mistakes. We have egos. We're power hungry at times, and that's humanity. And that pure rational explanation of, right now I can see Trump looking at Putin and Ukraine and saying, guys, this isn't good. You're not making as much money as you could. Let's stop this war and get back to making money. And both of them are like, yeah, what? You're missing it, man.
Do you think he understands the concept of, a blood feud? Of, if you asked him to explain, Israel and Palestine or India and Pakistan, because we know he doesn't understand Ukraine and Russia. Do you think he understands the concept of, a blood feud, a civilizational battle? Do you think he understands that?
I don't know. I'm not going to try to get in his head on that, since I think all of that stuff plays second or third to the economic piece, is just kind of my take.
Yeah, I think you're likely right. It is interesting that he seems to think, despite all facts, that an economic relationship between the U.S. and Russia would be beneficial to us, especially he wants to have that relationship overtake the relationship with the EU. He seems to think that we're better off that way. It's a very boomer opinion, because
I disagree there.
This is not, Russia is not the USSR. It is a sorry excuse for what the USSR was.
Shots fired. All right, I like it.
Well, I mean, am I wrong? It's just a dump. Anyways, but do you think the United States will increase aid to Ukraine?
Not in the near term, no. I think the best case scenario on that front is that, and again, playing into the economic side of all of this, I think that a positive move here would be that we stand up more manufacturing facilities here in the United States for weapon systems, for ammunition, and we open the floodgates to allow Europe, our European allies, to buy whatever they want. Call it a 10% markdown. I don't know. And then they can do what they want with it. If they want to buy 1,155 rounds and ship them to Ukraine, go for it, guys. We'd be happy to take your money to do that. We are strangely kind of trending in the wrong direction on that front as we're isolating our European allies, and they're choosing to stand up their own defense industrial base, which is a good thing. But I think before we see any significant U.S. aid shipments to Ukraine, I think it's more likely that we just allow more of our stuff to be purchased and sent over.
That is interesting. And speaking of our European allies, did you, by chance, so for the listeners, the State Department has a Substack, apparently, and they released what I can only describe as the unhinged ramblings of a 25-year-old, where they called to have civilizational allies in Europe. Did you read this, Preston?
No, I'm looking it up now. Holy cow, the State Department has a Substack.
Yeah, and so in this rambling thing, the kid went to Hillsdale.
Oh Christ! It's the top link.
Yeah, and he calls for civilizational allies, and in there, they really, they make the UK and Germany sound like they're North Korea, and then at the same time praise the AfD, praise France's Marie Le Pen, and praise Hungary, calling Hungary a great Christian nation that's been slandered or something like that. And they're saying that they're raising the alarm bell, that Western Europe is rebelling against the foundations of the West. That's pretty crazy. And this comes after Marco Rubio said that he would sanction anyone who censored Americans.
The dude protected all of his posts. He went private on Twitter. That's not usually a good sign.
Yeah, no, this post is going over like a stack of bricks. If you can read. Those who can't read love it. And the craziest part here about this is that, this administration threw that girl at MIT in jail for a op-ed she wrote, which is the most benign op-ed anyone's ever written about the war in Gaza. They threw her in jail and they tried to deport her over it. Is Marco Rubio going to apply sanctions to himself? Because he seems to be doing the biggest job when it comes to censoring Americans, not Europeans.
What is classic teleology? It says that's the guy's specialty.
Classic teleology. It sounds fake, but I'll Google it.
Classical teleology, stemming from Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, posits that everything in the natural world has a purpose or end. That doesn't seem strange.
It is, yeah. Something to do with Plato and Aristotle.
Everything has a purpose?
Yeah.
I thought that's kind of where we landed in general. I thought that's just kind of what we got to. Did that need to be called out specifically?
No. It's just the whole essay is bizarre. And they kind of just... The one thing they do complain about is they also complain in there about mass migration into Europe, they say. And now it's important to mention that 5% of Europe are foreign immigrants. Over 15% of the United States, 1 in 5 Americans, was born outside of the country. So, this administration's policy towards Europe is absolutely bonkers. For the listeners, you can't see, but Preston is reading this essay and he is actively grimacing. That's how crazy this thing is.
The comments are something else. Substack's interesting because people... it attracts a certain audience that likes to read this type of stuff, right? Which is different than what you might find on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook. And the comments tend to be like more well thought out and articulated and coming from people that are well versed in this stuff. So they're hammering him in the comment section.
It's absolutely unhinged that the State Department published this. Absolutely unhinged. The idea that Hungary is somehow a better ally, a more suited ally for the United States than the UK, France, Germany is absolutely nuts. Especially when you get down to the core that the United States, at its bottom, is a collaborative project between the Brits and the French in terms of a founding. So, it's absolutely bonkers. And
manifesto. All right.
As far as it does. You keep that guy away from schools. But as far as I know, this is official policy of the United States because they published it and they didn't say, these views are not our own. No, they just said, yeah, this is on our Substack. These are our views. It kind of has gone under the radar, and I wonder if people at NATO or the European Union are reading this and going, these people have lost their minds. They have to be. Or maybe it's just all the same to them now. Maybe they're just like, yeah, this is par for the course. J.D. Vance has his disciples of losers who live in the basement and have, fantasies of a Europe that is pure or something.
Well, we kept Ben on track, not getting into the personal attacks for most of the show, but of course we couldn't avoid that entirely.
I'm sorry. I just, if you're gonna sue us, just sue me. But speaking of nonsense, New York Times wrote this article, a news analysis article. I thought it would be branded as opinion because I was reading it and I thought, well, it seems like more opinion than analysis, but it is what it is. I guess analysis ultimately is opinion, though. But they wrote this article saying that Trump is preparing for a tripartite pact.
No. All right, tripartite pact, like straight out of World War II?
Yeah, so they say that the United States is going to make a deal with Russia and China to divide the world up into spheres of influence. And so that means Russia will have Europe, China will have Taiwan and the rest of Asia, and then the United States will have the Western Hemisphere. They say that they believe this based off the way Trump is acting, the way his beliefs system works. I wouldn't put it past him, but as far as I know, their language of he is preparing to do so seems a bit more imminent than one would think. And there's no doubt he's surrounded by enablers, but I don't think they would. I mean, this seems like a step pretty far, right?
But what does it entail doing? Like, it sounds more just like a theory.
So the United States withdraws from NATO, they withdraw from Europe, they withdraw from Asia, and instead the United States can now focus on taking Canada, Panama, Greenland. They have full control over the Western Hemisphere, and then China stays out, Russia stays out of the Western Hemisphere, and in return the U.S. stays out of the Eastern Hemisphere. I guess, is that what it's called? I've never heard it referred to that, but I guess it would be the Eastern Hemisphere, wouldn't it be?
Yeah.
So they stay out of the old world. And that is what the deal would be. Now, U.S. foreign policy for the past 40 years has been that spheres of influence don't exist because Scott Galloway talks about this a lot. No brand is stronger than the American brand. No one has bigger influence than the United States. And so if you agree to spheres of influence, the United States is handicapping itself, right? Because now all of a sudden, our people can't do on-world tours anymore. We can't enter in the trade pacts. We have the biggest influence in the world. So by voluntarily giving that up, we just weaken ourselves. And, they say that China would love a pact like this. I have no doubt about that. I have no doubt that China would love a pact like this. But I also think you're going to run into some errors because, number one, as we said earlier in this podcast, Russia is a Rudy-poo world power. Not even a world power. It's a regional power.
With nuclear
They're not
weapons.
even the strongest army in Russia.
That's the thing, is they just have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, right. It is a gas station of nuclear weapons. And they are not... Europe is the power there. The EU is. They have an economy 11 times larger. They have 4 times more people. I think there are several countries in the EU or Europe in general who could 1v1 Russia and walk away with a victory. So that's the first issue they're going to run into. I also think it's not 1880 anymore. And the gap between mid to high tier powers and like superpowers like the US and China are much smaller, right? So I just think you're going to run into an issue here. It also like fails to acknowledge countries like Turkey or Japan or Australia. Like, where does Turkey fall into all of that? Are they in the European sphere of influence? I don't know. It's all a pretty bizarre proposal that they lay out here.
It's interesting. I don't like it. I like where we are right now. I don't know that I want to trade Europe for South America. No offense, South America. You guys, love you guys. You're great.
Yeah, shout out Brazil.
But do we need to like trade one for the other? Do we have to? It feels like this is taking a bit of an extreme stance in the isolationist direction, and it's kind of a flavor of that by saying no, not just the United States, but like we're going to care about South and Central America too. See, look at the map, look at the globe. This makes sense. This is where we're going to. It seems like it's kind of a trend in that direction without being as extreme as we're not going to do anything outside of our own borders. I guess another question here is like, does everybody just agree with it? Or like, what happens if Brazil is like, yeah, no, we'd rather trade this type of material with China. We don't want to do it with the United States because it makes no sense. Like, what do we do then? That seems like a bit of a challenge.
Well,
am I overthinking
I don't think they've really thought that far ahead. The whole idea is
maybe there'll be a Substack on it. Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's pretty, like, the idea of spheres of influence is pretty old. And after World War II, that kind of, I don't want to say it went to an end, but it basically did, right? It kind of came to an end slowly, but surely. And then after the USSR collapsed, it's just done for. So I don't really know how they plan to make it work. It's, like I said, it's foreign policy straight out of the 1880s. But we have some questions from the viewers. This person says, Preston, I'm 28 and I'm about to join the Army. Any advice on what to expect from the culture to maybe something that might just be different and change of lifestyle?
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Congrats. So joining a little later, you just got to know going in, keep your head down, and there's going to be a lot of stupid stuff. It's the beginning of the military is definitely built for like 18 to 22-year-olds in the sense that you just listen and you just do. And it's if you overthink it, it's going to sound ridiculous and it's going to be hard to move through. Let's see. What is it? Expectations and a change in...
Yeah, what to expect from the culture to maybe something that might just be different in terms of change of a lifestyle.
I mean, it depends what the lifestyle and the culture is right now, but I would say personally, it's the most tight-knit group of people I've ever been around. There's always you don't feel it at the time. I think you'll probably have a better idea coming at it at 28 because a lot of people coming in, it's their first experience out of high school or maybe their first experience out of college, but you've had a little bit of time in the world. So my guess is you're going to be able to see that difference of the tight-knit community, the trust that I think is there. And one thing that I would be looking forward to coming in is kind of the honesty, the integrity aspect of it. That might be a little bit shocking in a good way. There's still people that lie. There's still people that cheat, all that stuff for sure. But I think you're going to see more accountability on a day-to-day basis than most people are used to, and that's usually a good thing.
Would either of you work as a Pentagon spokesperson if given the opportunity? If so, what would you change/improve?
Lead us off.
I think I'm too opinionated to be because I feel like I would give the government line and then I'd give my opinion on what the government was saying. I think I'm too opinionated. I also think the Pentagon's a pretty boring building. There's no cell service in there. There is a subway. The subway was all right. I mean, I don't eat Subway all that often, so I don't know how it compares, but, it was pretty good. But overall, I don't know. Maybe I would, I guess. What would I change and improve? I think there's a lot. I would bring back press conferences because what's the point of being a spokesperson if you can't perform? And that's what I would do. What about you, Preston?
Logistically, I wouldn't want to do it. I wouldn't want to live in D.C. I like our setup here in Tennessee. Wouldn't want to uproot my family. I also don't like the spokesperson setup right now feels very adversarial. Like there's a lot of trying to get you. Now, I think the culture in the Pentagon is a little bit different. You see that more at the White House through different administrations. There's never as much gotcha in the Pentagon. You tend to have the same reporters and the same organizations that have been there for a while, and there's positive relationships. I'd love to be able to help DOD and assist DOD. It's been a big part of my life. I think it's an important organization. I don't think I would like being a spokesperson because you've really got like the script and you need to stay on it. And, there's certain things you can't talk about, areas you can't wade into. I think I would have a hard time with that. I would not be opposed to working in media there. Maybe leaning into the second part of the question here, what would you do differently? I think I've ranted about this before. I thought that we would see under Hegseth just more openness in terms of other platforms, just turn on Instagram Live, start. We can use TikTok now, right? Does the government? No, maybe government can't. Depends on the day. Make TikToks. Just answering questions day in and day out, make it more available, more accessible. I think that is a benefit to the American people, and to a degree could open up some access to the service members and maybe reach a different audience there as well. So just more widespread use of social media. There is so much at DoD you can talk about without risking OPSEC. It's ridiculous. Like the idea that you can't talk about government and military because it's going to give our adversaries an edge, like 1% of things you can't get into. The vast majority of the other stuff you can and you should, I think.
Absolutely. And people forget this, but the spokeswoman for the Navy is a sworn enemy of the pod. So,
are we taking that on as whole? All right.
Yeah. People
she
forget
hates me,
that.
but
People
I didn't
forget.
know.
Oh, no. We ride or die, Preston. You got beef,
Cool.
I got
Yeah.
beef.
I like that.
So, and this last question here is, chosen. So you have to explain what the chosen company is for myself and for others here. But it says chosen company. Why are they running away from Ukraine when they are needed the most?
Yeah, so a little background here. Chosen Company is a group of American volunteers that's been fighting in Ukraine for a while. I think they got there right at the beginning of the war, like the opening days of the conflict. And they've gotten a lot of attention. It's a bunch of English speakers, so they do well in interviews and on social media. A couple of their guys are like very well-seasoned trolls on X and do a great job of kind of putting people in their place. They've also been pretty effective from everything we've seen in the fight. They have been pretty regularly utilized in some of the hottest sectors of the front. We haven't seen a lot in terms of operational activity from Chosen as of late. The reason for that's not clear. They have suffered losses, but that's nothing new. Their commander, Ryan O'Leary, put out a note recently saying that the company is disbanding, and I wouldn't immediately jump to they're running away from Ukraine because it's not clear the reason or what's coming of that. The organization could be disbanding and reforming in some different capacity. It sounds like the soldiers are likely just moving to different organizations. It could be a logistical thing. So we'll wait for more information on that, but a lot of good people there in Chosen have done some really good work, and in touch with a couple of them, fortunately, and we'll see. It sounds like they're waiting for some official announcements to come out before going on any podcasts or any interviews to kind of explain the situation there. But I wouldn't read too much into it quite yet because the Chosen setup was kind of an anomaly at baseline. The Ukrainian military is it has been becoming more and more of a kind of Western professional force, and we don't have anything like Chosen Company, 20, 30, maybe 40 guys from a different country fundraising with their own social media and all that stuff. So it would make sense over time that they would kind of be absorbed into the larger Ukrainian armed forces. That might be what we're seeing here.
Does the Ukrainian foreign service,
Legion?
what would you call it? Foreign Legion. Is it like the French Foreign Legion where eventually you get citizenship?
I'm not sure. There's a lot of different incentives and benefits that have been tied to this over time. I don't know. I don't know. It's changed a lot.
Interesting.
But I do know some of the people that went over have since become citizens of Ukraine. I don't know that is. That is not a requirement. I know that much. I would think that fighting in one of these units would make that more accessible, but I don't have the exact information on that.
It is interesting. I'm surprised we don't have a Foreign Legion. Actually, I shouldn't say I'm really not surprised at all. But
PMCs, kind of like the Blackwater type stuff, triple canopy. That's kind of it.
That's true.
Like these guys in
All right.
Gaza, whoever's providing security there, it doesn't have to be Americans. It could be just straight up mercenaries we're hiring from around the world. It's not necessarily an American Foreign Legion, but
That is true. All right. Well, I think that'll be the end of the show, unless you have a parting topic you would like to have. What are you doing this summer? Any big hobbies? Building birdhouses, tree houses, anything like that?
Going to NATO in a couple weeks, right?
That's true.
That's
Yeah,
the
we
big
are.
one.
We are.
That's the big plan for now. Yeah, it's officially summer here in my household because my daughter's out of school as of yesterday at noon. So she immediately this morning was like, "Why do you have to work? It's summer."
You know,
Right away.
that is something you kind of miss. It was kind of nice you just be off for 3 months.
She's like, "I'm done, man. What are you doing?"
Yeah. Now you don't have anything like that. Now, if you're lucky, you get a 3-day weekend. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Give us 5 stars on Apple and Spotify. And we will see you next week.